welcome to Tea and Conversations. My name is Karen, and if you're new to this channel, thank you for stopping by and checking us out. This is a channel dedicated to all kinds of conversations about topics having to do with relationships, emotional health, and God. And so I'm glad you're here, and I hope you enjoy the topics. If you're a subscriber, thanks for returning and for being here with us again today. So I have a returning special guest. Everyone, please welcome Tara Sanders. Welcome, Tara.
Hello.
Again.
Thanks for having me back.
We had such a great conversation the last time. And there were a couple of notes we couldn't quite get to because we lingered on in some other areas, which is fine. I really enjoyed it, and I've been getting some really good feedback from the conversation too. So
Awesome.
that's okay. So let's delve back into, if it's okay, your nightmares that you had.
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking, just for those of you who may not have heard this last conversation, you really should go check it out. We talked a lot about legalism in the church. And at the time you were attending a Christian school, a part of the church that we both attended. And you were like 7 years old, around there. And you had shared how you had experienced some pretty significant and graphic nightmares during that time. So as I was listening back to our conversation, editing the video, the question came to my mind. You mentioned not automatically getting up and telling your mom and dad about those nightmares. Mm-hmm. And so I was curious if have you ever divulged that to them? Had you never divulged it? If not, why not? Like, what do you think was going on there?
That's a really good question. And when I was going over the notes for today, I really had to think about, why wasn't I more vocal? Part of it, I think, is a personality thing. I just tend to be a private person and reserved. I have a very outgoing personality. I'm kind of like the louder one in the room. But in terms of just like my personal life, I don't, share that too, openly with people all the time. And so part of it, I think, is a personality thing. I do recall nights when I would run into my parents' room and wake my mom up and say I had a nightmare, and she'd let me crawl in bed for a little bit. And so I think they were aware that I had some fear at bedtime. But I mean, what kid doesn't? I mean,
yep,
what kid
right,
isn't
sure.
scared of the dark or has a bad dream or they see a monster, whatever it is.
Right.
So that's not necessarily abnormal.
Right.
I just never really shared the content, sort of the darker content of the dreams. And in thinking about that, and really just an overarching theme, I think, that is part of this conversation is just shame, is just maybe a little embarrassment, or people thinking like, oh, this is like really weird. If I tell people, they'll think I'm weird, or this is not normal, or it's scary.
So even with your mom and dad, you think that played a part? Even like sharing it with your mom and dad, there was shame there?
I think
and that they might think less of you even as a daughter.
For my parents, I don't know that they would have thought less of me as much as they would have just kind of been like, oh, okay, like, that's a little strange. Or other people, if I shared it with friends or a teacher, or even my sister,
right.
And that's a huge part of, folks like me who deal with depression and anxiety and just have different things going on internally. I think there's always that fear of rejection from people, or how people will respond to what you tell them. Like I had, when you tell someone, oh, I have these thoughts about, cutting myself, you're like, oh my gosh, that's so embarrassing and weird. I can never say that to somebody.
Right.
But then if you never say that to somebody, will that materialize? And so I think because of the shame we feel, or feeling like I shouldn't have these dreams, or it's wrong to be afraid, then it makes it all the more harder, especially with already having a personality that's private. On top of that, feeling, what if my parents think this is ridiculous? What if they don't believe me? What if And not that I had anything from the past to transfer onto that. I just
Okay.
think that fear, and we talked about this a lot in the other conversation, just the constant fear of
Yeah.
messing up or doing the wrong thing makes you afraid to admit to anything even looking wrong itself,
Mm-hmm.
or something being wrong with you. Like, is there something
Yep.
wrong with me that I have these dreams? And I obviously at that age didn't know, but yeah, I think a lot of it is, toxic shame is, it's like a self-deprecating shame. And I think the struggle with that is that you don't even, in some cases, especially for people who have faced abuse, perhaps that shame was put on you, or you were convinced,
Oh, sure.
you were
Yeah.
doing something wrong. But we also touched on last time, and I don't know if we called it by name, but just spiritual abuse, like feeling like, oh, if you do this wrong, if you do that wrong, oh, God has this big camera and he's, taping everything you're doing. And you're just like,
Yes.
oh no, like he's everything, I'm going to be judged for all these things. And then I
Yes.
think that fear leads us to maybe doing things we may not normally do, or it causes us to go deeper into ourselves and to really
That's good.
hide.
Yep.
And so I
Yep.
think that the fear and the shame go hand in hand, is that
Yep.
it's driven by fear, and then it causes us to hide more, it causes us to avoid, because there was always this pressure of having to look like this good Christian person.
Yeah.
And so revealing any sort of, stains or ugly spots or wrongdoing or whatever it was, that's just not acceptable.
Right.
And I think that at an early age, I realized, oh, well, these things aren't acceptable. I'm not supposed to do this, or I'm not supposed to have these feelings, or this and that is wrong. And that was the struggle later on when I talked about, picking out the outfit, is a complete loss of sense of self, because none of my true feelings and none of my
Yeah.
truth was ever revealed or coming out. It was always
Yeah.
suppressed,
Right.
by this fear of sort of being found out. And so I think with the dreams, a lot of it just centered around shame,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
fear is
And
really
fear.
the
Yep.
heart of it. Yeah.
Right. And so that whole thing you were just talking about with appearance, right? Do
Yeah.
you think that on some level your parents were also acting within that as well, having now attending the church,
Mhm.
and with that being such a huge part of that environment?
Mhm.
Do you, looking back, I don't think when you were that age you could interpret it that way,
Yeah.
but do you think that that was also part of it, so it kind of permeated your home environment as well?
I mean, I think that goes without saying for all of the families in that church, is that
Okay.
everybody, I think, felt that pressure in some way. And
Yeah.
I would assume that even more so the parents feeling this pressure to make sure their kids aligned. And so I
Yes.
can imagine there was a surmounting pressure on the parents. There
Yes.
must have been.
Exactly. Yep.
Just being a parent myself and knowing how much
Yep.
pressure there is without being in that kind of environment, I can imagine.
Right. Well,
Um,
that's what I was thinking about as you were talking, like with my own kids when they were little. And you're so right. Nightmares are part of childhood for sure.
mhm,
Thunderstorms at night.
right.
We got woken up many times. So, but I think too, especially with creative minds, it's
Mhm,
even more so. Like my son,
yeah,
I can't tell you how many times between 6, 7, and 8 I got woken up because he had some kind of dream.
yeah.
Um, but one of the first things I remember doing was asking him, "Do you want to tell me about it?"
Mhm,
Because I knew if he talks about it and gets it out into like reality,
mhm,
it loses its power.
right.
And sometimes he would, and sometimes he'd be like, "No, I'm too tired." And then he would just lay down next to us and go to sleep.
Yeah,
So that's what I kind of want to take away from this for people listening,
yeah,
is how important it is for us as parents to give our children a safe space to share everything and anything, no matter if we think that it's ridiculous. I know for me, if I were that age, well, I would never run into my parents' room because I never had that feeling of safety with them. And it was that same fear and shame of they're going to think I'm ridiculous.
Right.
They're going to think I'm not towing the line. I'm not following in where I should
Mhm.
be and behaving the way I shouldn't have those dreams. If I'm a good Christian girl, I
Right.
shouldn't be dreaming about Satan.
Right.
Right?
What's up with
Right?
that? Yeah.
What's that? What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Which is another form of spiritual abuse,
Yeah.
really, when you think about that, right?
Mhm.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I talk about that a lot in the book too,
Yes.
spiritual abuse, because it's not talked about enough.
Mhm.
And I think that that's another element to legalism that's there,
Yeah.
is definitely spiritual abuse, and that's something that needs to be talked about more. And there's so many of us who went through it as children, and now we need to heal from it
Yeah.
so that we don't carry on with our children. We break that cycle.
Right.
Um, so looking back now, in hindsight, do you think you would have tried to tell your parents the specifics about the dreams? Do you think that that would have changed anything, or no?
Honestly, I have to say no. And again, I think part of it is a personality thing. And I think the other part of it is just when I'm realizing as the layers of the onion continue to be peeled in my life throughout the
Okay.
years, is that
Okay.
shame is just still something I struggle with. I think it's still
Ah,
something. And I think, it's funny after our last conversation and reading over the notes, and some things that have happened in just the past couple of weeks, I realized that's actually something that I think I still struggle with. And that goes back to our earlier conversation about how, obviously God can do anything. He can, heal someone like that. But
right.
sometimes some of these things are a process,
Yes.
or you buried them in the backyard, but you buried them alive. And sometimes you're not conscious of it. Maybe you're in denial of it. Maybe you even forgot about it. And then
Yeah.
something will happen and you think, oh, wait a minute. I am struggling with this. And I didn't even realize I was still struggling. I thought that
Right.
was in the past. And I didn't even
Right.
realize, even with my depression, sometimes I'll go through these terrible bouts, and sometimes I won't have a bout in such a long time that I just
Yeah.
even forget it's there, that I even forget
Yeah.
it's just part of my life, or has been, because it's
Okay.
been such a long time. And then
Yeah.
it comes back and I remember, how it is and
Okay.
how I am. But sometimes I'm even not even conscious of it. And then something will happen, or you'll be triggered by something that reminds you, or whatever it is. And just coming to that realization, okay, maybe this is something I haven't processed.
Okay.
Maybe it's something you're still processing, or maybe it's just
Hmm.
something you buried and you just haven't touched it at all. Because I think
Yeah.
that's the case with some people, where it's like, no, I can't even look at this thing. I can't
Yeah.
touch it.
Yeah.
And so sometimes folks don't start their healing journey to a very long time afterwards,
Yes. Yeah.
um, if they
Yeah.
start one at all. So,
Exactly.
so I just,
Exactly.
yeah, I think just realize that's kind of an ongoing thing that I'm working through. But just
Right.
wondering why, like, why, if you're out of that environment, if you've had all these years to heal, why do these things keep coming up?
Mm.
And I think part of that is just because we're human,
Yep.
and just because, we can't change the past, those life experiences that we had, as much as we'd like to change the past or rewrite it, those things still occurred. And it's not just like, oh, I'm just going to get over it. It's just, I'll snap my fingers. And it's like grief. It's like, you're not going to, you may not be sobbing every single day after, a parent passes away, but you'll be grieving,
Sure.
and you'll have those moments.
Talked last time too about how it's very difficult to articulate and even I think understand how devastating legalism, spiritual abuse,
Mhm.
all trauma is, especially on a child's mind and psyche. I think it's just, um, I don't know that enough credence has been given to the devastation of all of that on a child. And so that's why when we're still surprised when adults come out 20, 30, 40 years later and
Right.
say, wow, this is still a struggle for me. This is still how I'm feeling, the shame, the fear, all of it.
Right.
And we think, really?
Yeah.
Because again, this is why we need to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because the more awareness that is given to it, the more it will not be a surprise.
Right.
I'm not surprised anymore when someone tells me, oh, I'm still struggling with this and I don't, I didn't know. Yeah, because I'm right there. I've been the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's so healthy how you're looking at it. It's the same point I've come to in my own healing process is that, oh, okay, it's something's been triggered. It's reared its ugly head again. So, I hate it because again, it's not something I did. It's something that was done to me from somebody else. But we talked about that last time too, how, our choices, good and bad, sinful or not, affect other people, especially those directly around us.
Yeah.
Understanding, number one, that the responsibility of the trigger belongs on the person that caused the trauma in your life.
Mm-hmm.
The second level of responsibility is for you to do the work to heal from it so that you don't cause trauma on somebody else's life.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole cycle we're trying to break.
Right.
And I have to tell you, I've learned that there's a group of people I discovered that do not agree with that principle at all. They do not believe that just because you were traumatized and if you don't deal with it, you're going to traumatize other people.
Mm-hmm.
But I tell you, Tara, I have seen it over and over and over in my
Mm-hmm.
own life and in many, many people around me. That cycle does not get broken.
Yep.
And it's devastating. And it's so, it just breaks my heart.
Yeah.
Because what I've also seen is when you break the cycle, I've seen the good that comes from that.
Yeah.
And the healing that comes from that. And, I think that's where God is at. I really believe that's what he wants for us is for us to be healed and not continue the cycle of trauma. One other thing we didn't quite get to last time was talking about how now you feel like you are safe in a church.
Yes.
Okay. You're around safe people.
Yeah. I think
Okay.
that I always was sort of
Well,
suspicious
yeah,
of
rightfully so.
church people. Definitely, one of my bosses at work always says, I trust people until they give me a reason not to. And that was not my MO
Yeah.
at all. I
Right.
was thinking, I totally
Right.
distrust people until they earn my trust. So I am the complete opposite from you. But I have always struggled with, I say, church and church people. And I remember
Right.
telling my husband, this will always be a struggle for me. I will never love a church. I don't see myself doing that. And the church we're now, we love. I mean, we
Yeah.
have 3 small children and we get there on time,
Yeah.
usually about 10 minutes early. And
Yeah.
I feel like it's because subconsciously we want to be there and
Okay.
we get there on time. I
Yeah.
mean, you got all these, folks without kids rolling in 15 minutes late.
Yeah.
Guys, get it together. If I can get to church on time, you too can get to church on time. So yeah, it's been such a healing process. When we first started going to the church in 2017, the worship pastor there just played a huge role. I would say of any pastor I've ever known, he really understood what it was to be a shepherd and to
Okay.
shepherd people with love. And if you can't shepherd people with love, then you're not a pastor. You might
Yeah.
be a great teacher. You
Yeah.
might be a CEO. You might be awesome at being in
Yeah.
control and telling people what to do.
Right.
But, people see him and what a great pastor he is. He's a musician. He's a recording artist. He's this person people want to emulate. But what
Yeah.
they don't understand, it's not about his big accolades, although he has
Mm-hmm.
them.
Mm-hmm.
What's really important about him is that he understands the very simple fundamental thing about pastoring people, and that's shepherding them with love.
Yeah.
And I don't believe there's any other way to do it. And if you're
Yeah.
not being shepherded with love, find a new pastor. And it doesn't mean your pastor is not going to tell you the truth or hold
Right.
you accountable or talk
Right.
about sin or preach what's right from the Bible. It's all there. But
Yeah.
if their attitude is just that they want control, or they're just
Right.
bossing everyone around,
Right.
or they don't know your first name, that, I mean, I'm putting myself in a soapbox here. Just,
Yeah.
find a community where you're seen and
Yes.
heard, where they're plugging you in, where they're seeing your
Yes.
gifts, they're utilizing them, and you're being
Right.
taught from the world word what is good, what is true, honest, just,
Right.
lovely and not lovely. And,
Right.
where the gospel and sin and redemption, all of that is being preached the way it should be, straight from the
Right.
scriptures, and they're not wavering with culture. And I
Right.
think there's just unfortunately a lot of churches that don't meet even those small standards, because I have a whole list, but out of the basic things.
Well, but we should. And I was going to say, back up just a little bit when you're talking about, she, the boss you had that said to trust people until they give you reason not to.
Mhm.
My husband's MO is trust but verify.
Mm,
Okay.
okay.
So, yes, yes. So I've tried to adopt that. And you
Yeah.
probably remember in my book, I talked about you put people, not everybody's going to be close to you. Like you put
Right.
people in those rings, right?
Yeah.
And and sometimes they'll slide back and forth
That
because
is true.
you're trusting, but the verification's coming back fuzzy. So
Right.
we're going to push you out just a little bit.
Right.
And I think that's okay because,
Yeah.
people go through different seasons of life. They react differently.
Hmm.
And so I know I've become hugely aware of boundaries since healing and how important they are, because when people, they may at one point in time, one season, treat me well, but then if something is triggered in their own life and they begin to react poorly, and
Yeah.
that kind of spills over into our relationship, I got to push them out a little bit then, because I'm the only one who can take care of myself emotionally, health, and be healthy. That's my job, to take care of myself. So I have to guard against
Yeah.
people that will try to come in and be unhealthy emotionally.
Hmm.
Um, doesn't mean I can't love them through it,
Right.
but there's going to be
Yeah.
good boundaries set in place
Yeah.
so that I'm not dragged back down into depression
Hmm.
and anxiety and all of that again. And, so over the years with some people, that has meant totally disconnecting.
Yeah.
Eventually it got to that point. And with others, it's just, well, they're just kind of still kind of out a few rungs
Right.
on the circle. And that's kind of where they're hanging out,
Yeah.
but that's okay.
Yeah.
I think we have to be okay with that. In a legalism environment, that's a big no-no. You
Hmm.
you don't put people on different, you don't have boundaries. It's everybody comes in and everybody, it's because that's the only way you can get groupthink. We've heard
Hmm.
that a lot lately, that
Yeah.
term, right?
Right.
That's all part of it's really part of like a cultish mindset,
Hmm.
um, to maintain control over people.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm kind of getting off on a tangent, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to touch on that too, because I feel like I've encountered, I've had to confront a few friends about their pretty terrible boundaries or their lack
Okay.
of, and understand too, as believers, that putting up a boundary isn't unkind. I think people think if you put
Right.
up a boundary, it's like this barrier against people, but that's not
Right.
necessarily what a boundary is. I think you have to
Not at
know
all.
yourself and understand this person's struggle and realize that we all struggle and make mistakes. But
Yes.
if the relationship is getting toxic or going in a toxic direction,
Right.
it's okay to put up some parameters to help it stay healthy or to bring it back
Yeah.
to health. And
Yep.
so I think you have to look at it from that perspective, as in, I'm doing what's best for my family and for myself. And I'm also doing what's best for this person. Because if
Yes.
they're not able to draw a boundary where they need to, maybe
Yep.
you can help build the parameters that help them stay, where they need to stay,
Yep.
and get healthy, or do whatever they need to do to be healthy. And
Hmm.
that's where those love and relationships come into play. Um, but also, if the person hurts your feeling, especially if it's a friend loves you, there's a lot of
Yeah.
grace there.
Oh,
And obviously
sure.
forgiveness, like, people just, make mistakes in relationships. But
Yes.
I believe that boundaries are kind,
Yes.
especially, well, and obviously go about them in a loving way, but it's
Yep.
kind, for you and the people who are
Yes.
impacted by the people who are around you. For
Right.
instance, my kids. But it's also healthy and good for the person who can't figure out that boundary, or who can't stay in a healthy place,
Hmm.
helping them get to that point, just
Right.
very gently. It's sort of like, it is
Mhm.
sort of shepherding. It's just sort of like, let's guide you in this direction.
Right.
Let's guide the relation. Let's go over here with this relationship or whatever.
Right. Right.
And it doesn't mean that boundary will be there forever. Maybe it will, but it
Right.
enables you to just love that person from a distance while they work out whatever it is
Yes.
they're working out or doing,
Yep.
or whatnot.
Yep.
And so boundaries are kindness. I'm gonna put that on a t-shirt.
That is good. I like
Boundaries
that.
are kindness, folks. Write it,
Hmm.
write it down.
Yes. Yes. Yes, they are. Very much so. So I did want to mention too, you were just talking about church and where how you found, a safe church with people in
Yeah.
it. And I have not.
Okay.
I have not found that.
Okay.
I found it once, and it was in New Hampshire just before we moved to Maryland.
Yeah.
And so we were only there for like 2 years.
Okay.
And it was, yeah, I have not found it since.
Okay.
When we were in Maryland, I think we attempted 4 different churches.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Down here, I've attempted a couple.
Okay.
But I tell you, Tara, every single time it ends up that, um, well, it's not the same for
Yeah.
every church. There's been a little
Right.
bit different element for everything. But overall, what I'm discovering, and it's also with the interviews I've done with pastors in regards to my second book. Um, I don't know how to say this without sounding without sounding judgmental. I don't want to be
Right.
judgmental. But yet I feel like I just need to say it the way it is.
Yeah.
One pastor actually said to me, the buck stops with him on every decision that happens with the church.
Okay.
That's what I said. Okay.
Yeah. I was like, I really don't know what to say to that.
um, that doesn't seem healthy to me.
Yeah. It
Not
sounds very
only that,
CEO-ish, right? And is
yes.
there an elder board keeping him accountable? What's the
Yes,
biblical model?
but it's made up of his family members.
Ah, yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's, and
Yeah.
like you said, it's not that I'm hearing from the pulpit anything completely
Right.
off truth of
Yeah.
God's word or God. But when you start getting going, it's like when you pull back the curtain to see
Right.
what's going on behind,
Right.
it's like, I don't know. This doesn't
Hmm.
feel right. It, for me, it doesn't feel safe. I
Yeah.
see I see a whole lot down the road that's going to go wrong,
Yeah.
and I just don't want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
So it's been a challenge for me to find friendship,
Hmm.
to find I mean, not with God. I think
Right.
that's why, like in our last conversation, I mentioned how many different ways I experience God.
Right.
Um, I just went to the beach yesterday with some friends, and we're just sitting there, and it's just like, how can you not think and experience God here at the ocean. How can you
Right. Yeah.
not? It was just so beautiful,
Yeah.
and the scene would change because there were clouds forming and then they would go away. So the sun looks different, the water looks
Yeah.
different. I mean, it's just constant changing. And each time my mind would go to God,
Yeah.
and I'd start to have a little conversation with him about whatever, whatever
Yeah.
is in the moment.
That's awesome.
So that's where that's how my relationship with God has changed over the years. It's so much more personal now.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I've not needed the church to do that.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, I'm very grateful for that because I'm finding God in spite of not finding a church.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm against church,
Mm-hmm.
not at all. And if you can find a good one, I think that's phenomenal. My message is, though, if you can't find one, find people that are like-minded and you can have good conversations, because
Mm-hmm.
like we talked last time, God he's all about relationship.
Yeah.
And so when we have healthy relationships around us, that's how another way God speaks to us, another way that God fills us.
Mm-hmm.
On top of doing your own work in the relationship with God, that's another element to it, I believe. And so I think that's just as important.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think having the healthy environment bears healthy fruit, right? Like
Yep.
what you're planting, what you're investing, what you're sowing into
Right.
something. If you're sowing, sincerely, if you're sowing healthily, like that's the fruit that's going to come of it. And I was thinking about one sort of church experience that I had after college. A friend of mine started a young adult group in the town where I lived. I went to UNC Asheville.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a bunch of young adults, some right out of high school, some in college, some working. We would meet at someone's house. We would break bread to the point of literally, we would have a menu for dinner and everyone would bring ingredients and we would cook the dinner together and we would eat the dinner together.
Okay.
We would worship together. Just someone would pull out a guitar. Worship
Mm-hmm.
was however long it needed to be. And then we'd pull out our Bibles and talk about the word of God. And I always felt that, okay, this must have been what the early church was like. When
Oh,
they
okay.
met in Chloe's house, I feel like this must have been the type of community that they had. And it was every Tuesday night. It wasn't on a Sunday. There was no pastor. There were no programs. It was very organic, but I grew more spiritually in the 3 years that I was in that group. I mean, just exponentially in my
Mm,
spiritual life, went very deep with people. I mean, I
yeah.
remember Tuesday nights where like one of the girls would be having an issue that she was upset about. We'd all gather at the female leader's house and have a slumber party that night and stay up all night praying together. And I just thought
Wow.
like this is what the church is supposed to
Yeah.
be. This is what we're
Yes.
supposed to be like, just
Right.
deeply in each other's lives,
Right.
eating together, talking together, worshiping together, looking at the scriptures together, having
Yep.
conversation about it, really diving
Yes.
in, learning from each other, learning something, hearing from God.
Yep.
That was just the church to me.
Right.
I'm probably, when it comes to the trellis and the vine, I'm certainly more trellisy. I'm definitely more organic, just rather have a room with a guitar and no sounds. I mean, I'm just like stoked
Yeah,
about
right.
church. So that's
Sure.
that's a personality thing and a
Sure.
preference for me.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think I
and
think I'm right there with you.
and I'm probably frighteningly organic to some people at church. But I grew so much more spiritually in that
Yes.
environment than I did on
Yep.
Sunday mornings. And so I think
Yes.
also you have a generation, well, and of course, with the aftermath of COVID, you have people who are disenchanted with church or realizing
Yeah.
how disenchanted they are.
Yeah.
And I think that what we've tried to provide in the past decade is an experience of like a cool coffee shop and awesome
Yes.
lights and music
Yes.
and we've been entertained and we've been sort of drawn in by these, benefits of being there.
Yep.
And I think the focus has gotten off of the gospel in a lot of ways. I think the truth of scripture isn't being taught in churches the way it should, with the whole truth, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything. And just bringing people to a place of just sincere community and sincere worship and, talking about hard things, but wrestling together as brothers and sisters and coming together over those things. And I think that's why you have these young people deconstructing, because they're disenchanted, but they're just not sure.
Well, that's a really good point, because, and this kind of segues into our next points, but the whole way that church is today, it doesn't allow for you to really have, like you were saying, support, get into each other's lives, be intimate in relationships that way,
Yeah.
in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't allow for that. Now, the group you were just talking about allows for that. And I think that's what's hugely missing. But because, and this is traditions, long, decades long tradition of how we do church, right? You got one man up behind the pulpit. You've got programs, like you said, you've got the lights, you've got the singers, you've got entertainment, you've got coffee. That's where we've gone instead. And it's a business now.
Right.
More
I
than
do
it
like the
is.
coffee, don't get me wrong.
I know.
But
there would be coffee in my group, let me tell you.
There'll be coffee in heaven.
Yes, there will be. 100%. But yeah, but that's my husband and I have had countless conversations about this, because it's like, I'm tired of being a part of that.
Right.
And what the segue here into what we were talking about is that what this has led to, and I call it a dynamic, but that's not the right word. The way church is done now, and it has been, right? Because I've always wondered, what was it really like in the first days of right after Jesus went to heaven, after resurrection, and he went to heaven, and and I think some people have tried to capture it, like in movies and shows and things like that. I think it's pretty cool sometimes, some of them I've seen, that it's just you and me talking.
Right.
It's just you, me, and maybe another person talking.
Right.
It's not this someone standing up there every Sunday morning, behind a pulpit and having all these programs and all these things. It's more intimate. It's more about relationship.
Right.
So the more the church has gotten away from that, the harder it is to come back to it, because now you've created this monster of a system, and it's full of flaws. It's because we are flawed people, right? And we talked about this in our previous conversation, not a video, but in previous conversations, about how there's perversion of truth, there's a lack of accountability, there's a huge lack of discipleship. And why? Because in the way the system of the church is right now, it's easy to hide.
It's easy to hide. Exactly. You hit the nail on the head, because I think some pastors would say, oh, but our coffee ministry leads to those conversations, which I get. I understand that, but I've been to churches that had plenty of coffee and no one has spoken to me. Yes. So I don't think that the coffee is what leads us to the conversation. Maybe it sets the tone in the room, but it's really the heart. And it's what you're fostering, when you're leading the sheep and you're discipling the sheep. If you're leading people into biblical community, right, and into that depth, and you're teaching, you're guiding, discipling, teaching folks how to have that community well, whether you have coffee or not, you're still going to be able to connect. Yes. And so, and I think with I think, I don't know what it was, just in the 90s and 2000s, where it became, how do we sort of attract people to church? Yep. Which I think makes sense, and I think too, with just discipleship, you have all of these extremes in evangelicalism.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of just sort of, clunking someone over the head and saying,
Right.
you need to do this,
Mm-hmm.
fire, hell, and brimstone, or saying, here's 8,000 rules you have to follow, and then you'll be good with God.
Right.
Instead, Jesus modeled this perfectly, discipling people. And we see his interactions with Peter and other people had questions, and, he's teaching, he's correcting, he's,
Exactly.
shutting things down when they needed to be shut down, but he's embracing
Right.
and loving people when they need to be loved. And he's showing them the way,
Yep.
as opposed to just clunking these guys over the head. Like, what are you doing? You need to,
Right.
And so he
Right.
modeled that perfectly, is that guiding people, that teaching and that guiding and that shepherding, and sort of that grace we have with each other. Like you said, being humans, there's no perfect church.
Right.
Um, our church certainly isn't perfect, but I believe at the core, at the heart of it, we're doing the right things, and we're doing them
Yeah.
biblically, and there's a sincere desire to foster that, even if we're not perfect at it.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, what I'm looking for, is that the sincerity
Yes.
of hearts, and that
Sure.
being in the right place. Because obviously, things will always happen, but
Right.
uh,
And I think until more pastors realize, you know, that sincerity is what is needed, we're going to continue to hear about, leaders and pastors, having this these hidden things that they struggle with.
yeah,
I can't remember if we talked about this in the last video or just a conversation you and I have had about, pastors being arrested for having child pornography on their computer,
mhm,
um, pastors coming out as being bisexual,
mhm,
uh, you know, years, decades after being married and being a pastor, and it
yeah,
comes out that all along
yeah,
they were having affairs, with the same sex,
yeah,
you know. Um, it's just so heartbreaking.
yeah,
And I've always been of the type of person to ask why.
right,
If you tell me something is this way, well, why? I would get looked down upon and told I was rebellious because I kept questioning authority, but that's just the way I am. I just question everything. So when I hear about those stories about pastors coming, being found out, because I don't know that any of them just come forward. They always are found out,
right,
and I think, why? What was going on with them? And is anyone taking the time now to do that with them, to be that
mhm,
person, which is really what a supportive person does? You come alongside someone and say, how can I help you?
yeah,
I'm not saying that we have to take all these pastors and just throw them out to the wolves and,
yeah,
be, you know what I mean? And just
yeah,
be like totally distanced from them.
yeah,
No, they need grace. They
mhm,
need support. And hopefully
mhm,
be open to that,
yeah,
because you can't help somebody that doesn't want to be helped.
right,
If they're not sincere, right? If they
mhm,
don't find sincerity in their own selves,
yeah,
then they can't be helped. But
yeah,
that's what I would love to see. I'd love to see that switch
right,
of becoming so healthy, from the top down.
yeah,
I think that's the only way things are going to change.
mhm,
Um, because I don't know if you saw this, but I saw a headline the other day how Christianity is soon going to become, it's already, I don't know if it's already become the minority religion in this country, or it is soon going to become
mhm,
like even abolished
yeah,
because of the where it's going.
yeah,
And I thought, it's no wonder we're
yeah,
we're like you were saying, we're focused on the wrong thing. We're
mhm,
not focused on people and relationship. And I don't know what it's going to take to change that and to turn
yeah.
it around, except to just do our part, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I think too that we also seem to focus a lot on, God is love, and he's a loving God, and he's gracious, and we have, really pretty scripture printables, and everything is very cute and everything is very pretty, or it's very pressed and well done or whatever. But, God is love. I mean, it says in the Bible, he's literally love, not God
Right.
has an attribute of love. He is love,
Is, yes.
but he's also just.
Right.
And he loves the sinner, but he hates the sin. And you can go on a very long time hiding, but nothing's hidden from God. And so you
Right.
see all these upheavals with these big time pastors and the
Right.
SBC, and maybe some people are shocked by that. I am not surprised,
No, I am not either.
but I also feel like God isn't just going to let these things go on and on and on. People say bad things happen. People say, "Where is God?" He's there and he is
Yeah.
concerned. And
Yeah.
I don't believe that a just God is going to allow these things to happen. And for the good of mankind, God is going to allow these things to come to light.
Yeah.
He's going to allow accountability to happen.
Right.
When we sin, there's consequence.
Right.
Yes, we have God's grace. Yes, we have his
Right.
redemption, but there's a response or a consequence to things that we do. And we teach our kids that, right? If you
Right.
disobey, like you have to sit in the corner, it's,
Hmm.
this is this, how the world goes. And so I think sometimes too, we forget that, I don't know, at least in my own mind, God is not just going to sit around and continue to allow and allow and allow until
Right.
the end. Like I do feel like his spirit is very much at work. I feel like he is intervening
Yeah.
on behalf of the church because he needs a pure bride. I believe it's Revelation 1:9 where he talks about the sanctification of the bride and her being pure and her being
Hmm.
ready.
Right.
And that's part of him making us ready, is the sanctification of the church, and we need it. And
Yeah.
we should desire it. We should,
Yeah.
God calls us to be holy and righteous. We should desire that. And if anyone should
Yes.
desire that sanctification, it should be a pastor. It should be leaders. It should
Yes.
be a pureness of heart. And that was the other thing about this pastor, is that not only was he a good shepherd, but he had such a pure heart. And
Hmm.
I believe that is really outstanding for a man of God to have a pure heart. And I
Hmm.
think that, when our motives are in the right place, where our intentions are in the right place, and we lead from a pureness of heart, not a perfectness of heart,
Right.
right? But a pureness of
Right.
heart in
Yes.
desiring to do God's will and
Right.
to do what he's calling us to do, even if we miss the mark sometimes. We have that intention. And so,
Right.
but we have to be intentional about community, intentional about accountability,
Yes.
intentional about the way we structure our churches to align biblically. Jesus mapped it out. He mapped out the Christian life.
Yeah.
He set up the church. This is how it's supposed to be. It's right there in
Right.
black and white. Here are
Right.
instructions.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Just follow the instruction manual.
Exactly.
It's
Yes.
all right there. Like
Right.
how to have a healthy church. And Paul made no qualms about calling stuff out and correcting stuff when people got off the beaten path. He had no problem saying, "Oh, no, 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 no. We're the church. We don't do that. We actually do this other thing. Yeah, don't go that way, go this way."
Yes.
And he was
Yes.
really good at that.
Wish we had some Pauls today.
Yeah, Paul, where are you?
Please.
We need you. But
Well,
I think it's
yeah, well, because I was just thinking about how important it is and how detrimental it is, because when you're a pastor, and again, I think though this is a failing of how things are, how the system is.
Mhm.
People look at those people, look at pastors as either God or next,
Right,
right there next to him.
right,
And they're not. They're human, just like
right.
you and me. But
Yep.
unfortunately, that's how people look at them.
Mhm.
And so when something is revealed, some type of, let's just use the pastor who was arrested for child pornography on his computer, um, online, which fortunate, unfortunate, you can find a lot now online, but the comments of
Mhm.
the article when it came out, and the comments of people that attended that church It was
Yeah.
devastating, Tara.
Yeah. I bet.
There were so many who said, I just started attending this church 2 years ago. I just got saved. And
Oh,
now I don't believe anything. I don't know what I can believe anymore.
right.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
That's huge. And I can remember when we stopped attending, my husband and I stopped attending CBC
Mhm.
because we had realized a lot of the legalism that had been going on and we just didn't want any part of it anymore.
Yeah.
And wow, going to another church that didn't have that, it was such a shock to my system
Hmm.
because I had been at CBC for 25 plus years.
Yeah.
So that was a huge shock to my system. And I remember thinking the same exact thing, like, well, what's really true?
Yeah.
If I've been told all these years that this is what's true, and now I'm finding out
Mhm.
that they have um perversed some of the scriptures, they've added to it, they've made up their own rules to it. How do I know really what God expects from me?
Right.
I've read the Bible and I thought I was interpreting it properly according to what the legalism people were telling me is how I should
Yeah.
interpret it, right? And
Yeah.
now that's not true. Oh,
Hmm.
that's not how God is. That's not who God is.
Right.
It really
Yeah.
threw me. So it's a responsibility that comes with it's a position that comes with a high cost of responsibility, a high level of responsibility.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's happened.
Mhm.
I don't know
Yeah.
what's gotten off kilter with these leaders that just
Yeah.
think that they can hide,
Right.
these things and it's going to be okay. It's never
Yeah.
going to have any, really bad consequences.
Hmm. It's
I
a
don't know.
faith crisis. And that's exactly what
Mm,
happened to me. And I just said, I mentioned this in the other video or our interview, that I just thought, well, if this is what Christianity is about, I really am not interested in this. And when I found
exactly.
people who were real and sincere, and I said, they have
Yes.
something I don't have, whatever they
Yes.
have, that's the real deal. And I
Yes.
think these deconstructors, if you will, that's what they call them.
Okay.
I don't know what the proper term is, but folks that are disenchanted or have sort of lost faith in the church or maybe lost
Right.
hope, which is sad
Right.
to think, is that they're not looking to be entertained. They're not looking for
Right.
something so over the top. They're not looking for the best coffee in town. I think that people, and
Oh.
especially unbelievers, because I actually have a lot of friends who are unbelievers, are
Hmm.
looking for something that is real
Yes.
and people who are real.
Hmm.
And certainly, there's a pressure as a pastor, as a leader, because biblically you are held to a higher standard because you are the shepherd and you are leading.
Hmm.
But if there's this, this person's this sort of godlike on a pedestal sort of president
Hmm.
of the church presence,
Hmm.
and they can do no wrong, and then
Right.
suddenly these pastors have a falling out and everyone's so shocked, it's like, but they were always human and
Yes.
they were always liable to fall.
Yep.
And so, again, missing the mark in terms of discipleship, missing the mark in terms of accountability, because like you
Right.
said, if we knew that this pastor had been struggling
Hmm.
in a sexual way, an emotional way, or whatever, we
Right.
have wonderful ministries and Christian counseling, and we could have helped this pastor and for lack of a better term, sort of rehabilitated them
Yeah.
to a place of being back in the lane God has for them.
Right.
And we can really help people,
Right.
lovingly help people, but we don't know
Yes.
what we don't know.
Right.
And so no one could help with the struggle. But I think too, we become too quick in some ways to say, oh, you broke the rule. And, even in the church
Right.
we grew up in, it's like if someone did something wrong, I have to, confess in front of everybody. And,
Oh,
I have to
yes.
face whatever punishment am facing for this.
Mhm.
And it was
Mhm.
all just sin and consequence. But
Right.
what about the redemptive part of the gospel? What about
Right.
this person has been called by God to be a pastor, to be a shepherd? Even David fell. David, lusted
Yes,
after Bathsheba, had her
that's
husband
right.
killed, married her
Yep.
anyway, the man
Yep.
after God's own heart.
Yes.
And,
Yep.
we could have just thrown the baby out with the bathwater and canceled him.
Right.
Or could we not, take this person who really truly loves God but made a giant
Right.
mistake and help them get back on track?
Right.
Because that's what God wants them to do. God doesn't want to throw us
Yes.
away. God wants us to
Exactly.
get on the right track.
Exactly.
And so I think it's
Yep.
twofold. I think it's our fear and
Yep.
shame and our lack of transparency. And then it's the judgment of others that keeps
Yep.
us in this place of fear and shame. And I think
Right.
that's the tug of war. That's
Yeah.
what's happening.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
Because it's so much better if someone comes forward and says, I'm struggling with this,
yeah,
versus they got caught.
right.
Because if you get caught, all trust is broken.
Yeah,
And I think that's when people severely judge.
yeah,
That's what happens, because
yeah.
now they feel
It triggers
betrayed.
that in them. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Yeah,
disaster. That's
yeah,
just unfortunately disaster. But if they come forward,
yeah,
and they begin to go down a path of healing, to
yeah,
be transparent and,
yeah.
humble, and
Mhm.
I'm struggling with this, and I need to get some help with this. That is totally different. People
Right.
can relate to that, right? Because we all
Yeah,
struggle.
yeah.
We all struggle. Sometimes some struggle with more severe things than others, but we all struggle. And
Mm-hmm.
we get that. We can connect to that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It would be so refreshing to hear more leaders understand that and practice it,
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, talk about that and encourage that. And then, like you said, just encourage authenticity and sincerity,
Mm-hmm.
in how they approach things.
Yeah.
That's what's needed.
Yeah.
Um, okay. So anything more you want to say about that before we move on to our last topic?
Okay. Let's do it. Let's go for it. I'm ready.
Okay.
Hit me with it.
I would love to chat with you more about your retail business.
Oh, yes. Okay.
So I want you to tell us things. I got a few questions, what it is,
Okay.
why you started it, and how can we be involved, and how can we purchase?
Okay. So in March 8th of this year, International Women's Day, I launched an online boutique called Fashion on Mission. And basically what we do, I say we, it's me and my partners, but I curate beautiful handmade jewelry from artisan partners around the globe. And these partners are typically organizations helping women who've been rescued from human trafficking find work, to help them get on their feet, to keep them out of the brothels, etc. Other
Mm,
organizations work in impoverished areas to provide dignified work to uplift folks out of poverty. Some of them, one of them is an aftercare program for women that have either come out of incarceration and or detox. So there are groups that use sort of handmade goods, things like that, as a means for revenue for their organization and to help women. And some women make a career out of it, some don't. They move on and get married or go to school and do other things.
okay.
But it's the idea that we have these big global problems of human trafficking, of poverty, that kind of thing. And how
Yes.
do we chip away at this big giant elephant? And they found, missions organizations, NGOs alike have found that the real problem, and I think Gary Haugen, who's the leader of International Justice Mission, actually wrote a book about this, is that the leading cause of all these things is poverty. And so if we tackle the issue of poverty, we help to alleviate some of these other problems. Also, education. Some folks just don't know basic math and reading and
Wow.
writing. So very
Mm,
basic skills that folks just don't have. And so if
yeah.
we're able to teach them,
Mhm.
right? Teach a man to fish. It's true. Teach a
Yeah.
man to fish.
Yeah.
Help them to be sustainable, So
Okay.
it's not just that we're meeting immediate needs and giving people stuff, which is fine because there are immediate needs. But
Right.
what if those supplies run out? What if those missionaries have to leave that country? What happens to these communities? And
Mm-hmm.
so these organizations have found that when we create some kind of business that they can all work at, or microfinance, entrepreneurs, things like that, that the
Yep.
sustainability of work, dignified work, helps these communities to thrive and to
Okay.
break cycles of poverty, to get out of distressful situations like human trafficking.
Yeah.
So so the reason I started it, actually last summer of 2021, I published my devotional, and then I was
Yeah.
asked to speak at a church nearby, from a woman who had gotten a hold of my devotional somehow and asked if I would come speak. And there was a woman there with a table of all this beautiful jewelry, and I came over and talked to her about it. And I noticed her prices were pretty reasonable. This really nice pair of beaded earrings was only $20. And I asked
Mm.
her, I was like, this is only $20? Like, is that all, is that all you're charging us? Should we, maybe give you some more money? And she said, oh, no, I don't take a profit. And $20 is enough for a family to have food for a whole week. And I thought, okay, this is interesting. So I
Mm.
buy this one pair of really cute earrings for $20, and a family eats for a week in Medellin, Colombia. Maybe this global monster issue, maybe the solution to it is a lot closer than we think it is.
Okay.
So then I started crunching numbers, and then I
Okay.
started doing research.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, wait a minute. I think we're on to something. So then I reached out to this amazing organization called Mercy House Global.
Mm-hmm.
And um, Kristen Welch is, I guess, the owner, CEO of it. And her and her family, when they were youth pastors, they went over to Africa. They went to Kenya. The whole family could not forget what they had seen and heard, and decided we got to do something about this. So they have a home for women, for pregnant women over there, called
Oh,
Rain
wow.
House. And then
Mm-hmm.
from there, they started to do products and things like that, again, realizing that this was a means to support the mission, but also to
Okay.
support the women. They have a
Right.
brick and mortar in Texas, and they partner
Oh,
with over, I think, 30 or 40 organizations worldwide. So they're a huge outfit.
wow.
So I found them on Instagram and I said, hey, I'm Tara. And I'm thinking about doing this, and I'm just reaching out, and here I am.
Mm-hmm.
And they were so kind, and they said, oh, well, we work with all these organizations, here's a list of them, feel free to call them. And I mean, they basically shared their whole vendor list with me, and were just willing to just help me. And I just started calling through the vendor list saying, hey, I would love to merchandise your goods in the US. And there are other women who do what I'm doing, but I don't think any specifically in the DC area who are a boutique.
Okay.
There's some in the South, there's some in the Midwest, there's definitely a bunch in Texas,
Mm-hmm.
um, but no one here that I know of. But I also realized I wasn't alone in my vision to start this company. And in a nutshell, it's a fair trade fashion company. So
Okay.
I've partnered with right now 6 organizations and counting. There's a few waiting on purchase orders. 6 organizations, and I partner with them, and I buy their goods at a wholesale rate,
Okay.
and I sell it for what they tell me to sell it for here in the US.
Okay.
And that equates to either an hourly wage. So the more I order, the more hours they have to work, or the more product they make. And that's a way for them to have jobs and make money.
Okay.
And some of them are photographers, and some of them fulfill orders. They're not all jewelry makers, but some of them are makers, some of them design. They're certainly not forced to do it. It's offered to them as an opportunity. No one's forced to do it.
Okay.
Um, and then some of the artisans, the ones in Medellin, Colombia, it's actually a displaced indigenous people group
Mm.
that missionaries and other folks are trying to help.
Okay.
and they live in these flats. I mean, there's a whole family in like a 1 room flat, and they have to pay rent every day. So every day they're going into the streets
Wow.
to try to make money. And so they're trying to help them, but their trade, their skill that
Hmm.
is passed down is called Embera beading. And it's this beautiful, high quality beadwork. I mean,
Mm.
absolutely gorgeous. And
Yeah.
this is a skill. And so they said, well, these folks have this beautiful skill. Let's
Yeah.
try to help them make a living with their skill.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times there's skill, but maybe they don't have a sense of business, or maybe they don't know how to read and write or basic math, or maybe they just live in an impoverished area to where I have this beautiful product, but I don't have anyone to buy it.
Yeah.
So that's where, America comes in. And so for Fashion on Mission, our whole thing is just, you can meaningfully purchase the things that you purchase. And if you're
Yeah.
looking to purchase a beautiful accessory, maybe instead of going to a big box store, maybe you'll think of us for yourself, for Christmas, for a
Right.
birthday gift,
Right.
and just and slowly start to make these changes. If we
Yes.
think more about what we're buying and where it comes from, because everything that's in your house came from somewhere. Someone,
Oh, yeah.
touched it, made it, sewed it. And we rarely think, because out of sight, out of mind, where it comes from and how it even
Right.
gets here. And so
Right.
it gives us more of an awareness, but also knowing what your money is doing when you're
Right.
buying these things, where it's going and how it's being used. And how, buying a pair of earrings for myself is hugely helping people in need. And so that's also amazing.
So do you know of any areas here in the US, poverty stricken areas here in the US where this is also made available to them? Or is that just, I know we have a different society here than other
Yeah.
countries, but do you know of anything like
Mhm.
that here?
Yes. So there's two groups in the United States that you'll find.
Okay.
And one is organizations that are helping refugees find
Okay.
meaningful work and get on their feet.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
so in Louisiana, there's a group of refugees who make some of our products. And then
Ah,
also in the South, there's actually two groups. One group, they were the very first rehabilitation home for teen victims of human trafficking.
oh,
And they work with
wow.
law enforcement all over the US, and they specialize in teens from 11 to 17 years old.
Oh, wow.
And they have one that's going off to college this year. So it's
Yeah.
like very
Yay.
exciting.
That
We have a
is.
college student, so
Yeah, that's
they're really
exciting.
excited that their program is, really going places. And then
Okay.
another group that's in the US is the group that helps women coming out of incarceration and detox. And so
Oh,
some of them, they call them master artists, and they are women who are very just sold out to making the jewelry. Others will come through and it'll help them move
okay.
on to the next thing. But they connect these women to over 120 organizations that supply all kinds of things to help them get on their feet, whether that's education or something like Dress for Success or helping with a
Yeah.
resume. And so it's this holistic approach to really getting these women out of these situations and on their feet.
Wow.
So in the
Wow.
US, it's more rehabilitation and reentry, or
Okay.
entering,
Yep. Yep.
than it is necessarily impoverished communities.
Right.
You'll find that, and also the organizations fighting human trafficking more so overseas
Yeah.
than
Right.
here.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, that's a great question.
How can we get involved? How can we purchase, and how can we
Yeah,
even like promote you more for
yeah.
this? Because I think this is a great idea. It's a
Thank
great,
you.
yeah, I think it's a great thing you're
Yeah.
doing.
So fashiononmission.com
Okay.
is the website. And then
Okay.
our Instagram is just lowercase fashion underscore on underscore mission.
Okay.
And follows help, likes help, comments. There's a link
Yep.
to purchase on our Instagram page as well.
Okay.
Um, I'm trying to think. Yeah. And for anyone, and I need to call a few people and I've been thinking of just seeing, if people purchase something, maybe putting it on and taking a picture and tagging us and,
Yes, absolutely.
letting
Yeah,
us know how much you love the pieces. Cause we've gotten a lot of good feedback. There's a lot of
good.
items. I have one necklace we've sold out of 3 times since
Really.
March. I cannot keep it in stock to, save my soul. So, but I curate everything from groups that really, just are amazing organizations doing amazing things, but who take a
Mhm.
lot of pride in their products being high quality, and
Okay.
who have a good business model. Not all of these groups are ready to sell in the US. I think some of them will get there. But
Okay.
the groups that we work with are just really just doing amazing things, but making amazing things.
Okay.
And it's just
Well,
things we can be really proud of. So,
I'm going to check it out.
okay.
And I'm going to spread the word.
Thank you. I
And so
appreciate
what
that.
we'll do is in the description of this video,
Mhm.
we'll put the link to the website. We'll
Yeah.
put the Instagram account
Okay.
name too, so people can go check you out there. Um, yeah, and we'll just, I'll keep promoting it as much as I can. I'm gonna go take a look at some things and see what I can buy.
Awesome.
um, yeah, because I think that's fantastic. Uh, well, yeah, kudos to you for
Thanks.
doing that.
Yeah, it's a big left turn. It was not, when I came out with the devotional and I've done more in terms of
Yeah,
worship leading and, teaching at church. This is a very hard left turn, it felt like, but I've always just had a huge heart for social justice and just a love
mm,
and a passion for global missions. And this is such a great way to involve myself when, I mean, obviously I have, a husband and 3 little kids. I may not be able to
right,
move to Timbuktu,
right,
but I feel that it's given me a very active role in what's happening around the world. And
right.
so that's very rewarding. That's been really cool.
Yes,
So
yes. Yep. I
yeah,
think that's great. Wonderful.
awesome.
All right. Well, we have come to the end of our notes.
Okay.
I don't know that it's any shorter than our last one, but
Yeah, probably not, but that's
here we
okay.
are.
We just have to talk.
Well, that's it, right? It's all good
Yeah.
stuff. All good stuff. All right. Well, I'm going to let you get on with your day
All right.
and appreciate again you coming on and sharing and opening up, about your past experiences and things you've been through. And I always love to, like you were saying earlier, we
Mhm.
learn from each other when we
Yeah,
have these types of conversations, right?
right.
You, I always try to come into these conversations with um, a mindset of what can I learn? What can I take away from this conversation?
Yeah.
I know I have things to contribute to
Yeah.
so that, but I
Yeah.
also know that I have things to learn. So
Yeah. Same.
I love it. I love being able to do
Yeah.
this. So thank you again.
Thanks for having
And
me.
oh, absolutely.
Great as always. Had a great
Absolutely.
time.
Yes. All right. So we'll make sure we link to your fashion on mission. Is that
Mhm.
correct? All right.
Yes.
We'll link to that and hope everybody will go and check that out. And until next time, Tara, I will see you again.
All right.